I never expected that a peaceful afternoon stroll would lead me to a shocking discovery. Karen, a stranger, claiming legal ownership of my grandparents' house. With forged documents in hand, she confidently believed she had won. But little did she know the truth would be uncovered. From the moment I confronted her to the climactic courtroom battle, it was a roller coaster of emotions and a fight for justice. Here's how it all went down. Before the incident at my grandparents' house, I was enjoying a peaceful afternoon stroll through the neighborhood. The sun was shining brightly, casting a warm glow over the houses and trees. As I walked, I couldn't help but reminisce about the countless memories I had made in my grandparents' house. It was a place filled with love, laughter, and a sense of belonging. Little did I know that my peaceful day would soon be shattered by an unexpected encounter. As I approached my grandparents' house, I noticed a woman standing on the porch. Her name was Karen, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression on her face. Intrigued but also concerned, I quickened my pace and approached the house with caution. "Excuse me, what are you doing in my grandparents' house?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of confusion and disbelief. Karen turned to face me, her eyes narrowing. "Oh, this is my house now," she said confidently. "I legally own it." My heart skipped a beat at her audacious claim. It felt like a punch to the gut. "That's impossible!" I exclaimed, struggling to comprehend the situation. "My grandparents have owned this house for decades. They would never sell it." Karen smirked, clearly relishing in my distress. "Well, I have the papers to prove it," she said, pulling out a set of documents from her bag. "They signed it over to me." My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what I was hearing. How could my grandparents betray us like this? I knew in my heart that something was not right. There had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding, anything to explain this unbelievable turn of events. But Karen seemed unaffected by my anguish. "It's not my problem if they were easily fooled," she sneered. "This house is mine now." As anger and determination welled up within me, I made a silent promise. I wouldn't let Karen get away with this. I would uncover the truth, expose her lies, and reclaim what rightfully belonged to my family. But little did I know the challenges that lay ahead, the secrets that would be unearthed, and the lengths to which I would have to go to seek justice. My mind was racing as I confronted Karen, determined to unveil her deceit and reclaim my grandparents' house. I knew I needed concrete evidence to expose her lies and bring her to justice. "I refuse to believe that my grandparents would willingly sign over the house to you," I asserted, my voice filled with conviction. Karen scoffed dismissively. "Your grandparents were old and easily manipulated. They were desperate for money, and I was more than willing to offer them a generous sum." Anger surged within me, fueling my determination. "You took advantage of their vulnerability. You preyed on their trust," I accused, my voice quivering with a mix of anger and sorrow. Karen's smug expression faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "It's not my fault they were so gullible. I saw an opportunity, and I took it." My heart pounded in my chest as I searched for a way to expose Karen's lies. Then, a glimmer of hope ignited within me. "If you truly have legal ownership of this house, then you won't mind showing me the documents," I challenged, my voice laced with determination. Karen hesitated for a moment, her confidence wavering, but then she smirked and handed me a set of papers, seemingly unfazed. "Go ahead, take a look. You'll see that everything is in order." As I scanned through the documents, my eyes widened in disbelief. Something didn't add up. The signatures appeared forged, and there were inconsistencies in the legal language. Karen had underestimated my attention to detail. "This is a fake!" I exclaimed, my voice filled with triumph. "You forged these documents! You manipulated my grandparents, and I won't let you get away with it!" Karen's face contorted with anger and frustration. "You can't prove anything!" she spat, her voice dripping with venom. But I wasn't about to back down. "I have the evidence right here, Karen. I will make sure the truth comes to light, and you face the consequences of your actions." With determination burning bright within me, I reached for my phone and dialed the local authorities. It was time to bring Karen's deceit to an end and restore justice to my family. I knew that exposing Karen's deceit and reclaiming my grandparents' house would not be easy. It would require meticulous planning, gathering evidence, and seeking legal assistance. Determined to bring her to justice, I embarked on a journey that would test my resolve and push me to my limits. I started by reaching out to a lawyer specializing in property disputes. After explaining the situation, the lawyer assured me that we had a strong case against Karen. Together, we formulated a strategy to gather evidence and build a compelling argument. The first step was to interview my grandparents and gather their testimonies. Sitting down with them, I listened attentively as they shared their side of the story. It was heart-wrenching to hear how they had been manipulated and deceived by Karen. Their trust had been shattered, and it fueled my determination to set things right. Armed with their testimonies, I began digging deeper into Karen's background. I hired a private investigator to uncover any information that could potentially weaken her case. The investigator uncovered a trail of deceit and manipulation, revealing a pattern of fraudulent activities in Karen's past. As the pieces of the puzzle started to come together, I organized a meeting with my lawyer and the gathered evidence. We meticulously prepared a case that would expose Karen's lies and prove her guilt beyond a shadow of a doubt. The day of the trial arrived, and I found myself in a courtroom, facing Karen. The room was filled with tension as the truth hung in the air, waiting to be unveiled. My lawyer presented the evidence, highlighting the forged documents, the inconsistencies, and Karen's history of fraudulent behavior. Witnesses, including my grandparents, took the stand, recounting the events that had unfolded and the emotional toll it had taken on our family. As the trial progressed, a moment of unexpected revelation came to light that shook everyone in the courtroom. During a recess, I stepped out into the hallway to gather my thoughts, the weight of the situation bearing down on me heavily. It was then that an elderly neighbor, a longtime resident of the community and a friend to my grandparents, approached me with a hesitant yet determined expression. She handed me a small envelope, her hands shaking slightly. "I believe this belongs to your family," she whispered, her eyes welling up with tears. I opened the envelope to find a series of photographs, each one capturing beautiful moments that my family had spent in the house, birthdays, anniversaries, and simple everyday joys. But it was the last photograph that held the courtroom in suspense, a picture that captured a moment just a few days before the forged documents were dated. It showed my grandparents happily enjoying a family barbecue in the backyard, a vivid contradiction to Karen's claim that they were desperate and willing to sell the house during that time. As I presented this newfound evidence in court, the room went silent, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. The photographs not only evoked a deep sense of nostalgia and the rich history of a home filled with love, but also served as a silent yet potent testimony to the lies spun by Karen. The judge and the jury scrutinized the photographs, the dates stamped on them providing a timeline that directly contradicted Karen's narrative. It was a powerful moment of truth, a poignant reminder of the deep roots and the loving memories that tied my family to the house. Karen's face turned a deep shade of red, her facade crumbling as she struggled to find words to defend herself. The photographs had brought a deeply personal and emotional dimension to the trial, unraveling Karen's web of deceit and showcasing the vibrant life and the close-knit community that she tried to undermine. This unexpected turn of events, brought forth by the heartfelt gesture of a neighbor, added a rich tapestry of memories and emotions to the legal proceedings, making the case not just a battle for property, but a fight to preserve the sanctity of home and the cherished memories embedded in its walls. With the courtroom moved by the powerful imagery and the clear contradiction in Karen's story, the case took a decisive turn. The community rallied, and more neighbors came forward, sharing their own stories and memories, painting a picture of a home that was much more than a piece of property. It was a repository of love, trust, and shared history, a place where generations had grown and flourished. Wow, what a roller coaster of a story. Can't believe Karen had the audacity to claim someone else's house. The twists and turns had me on the edge of my seat. Justice served. Who else is glad justice prevailed? I never imagined that a simple request from my cancer survivor wife would lead us down a dark and treacherous path. Little did I know that her hall pass would uncover secrets, betrayal, and a shocking revelation that would shatter our marriage. Here's how it all went down. My wife and I have been married since 2001 and together since 1999. She is the most intelligent, thoughtful, caring, loyal person I know, and I have always thought of myself as fortunate to have met and married her. She is, even today, aesthetically beautiful, and men have told her this throughout our marriage. She has always rejected their advances. Earlier this year, she was diagnosed with uterine cancer, stage 1, and had a full hysterectomy. I was never concerned about the cancer. It was diagnosed early, dealt with quickly, and she made a full recovery. I took time off work to look after her after the surgery, and all seemed well. There were some emotionally challenging moments for her, and although I'm not an emotional person, we dealt with them together. After her recovery, she was insistent that we start living life to the fullest, and took a 10-day trip to Europe, followed by a trip to Belize. We also have a trip to the UK and Spain, Portugal later this year. I'm fine with these things, building memories and crossing items off our bucket list. I also understand that these experiences stem from her feeling fragile. She also started practicing yoga, swimming, and attending healthy cooking classes. I was fully on board until last week. Last week, she walked through the door after a long day at work, her face bearing a serious expression that immediately caught my attention. She sat down next to me, took a deep breath, breath and said, "I've been doing a lot of thinking, especially since my cancer diagnosis. It's made me realize that life is too short to not pursue the things I desire." She paused, as if gathering the courage to continue, before she finally blurted out, "I want a hall pass." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to comprehend what she was saying. She went on to explain that a hall pass would grant her a one-time opportunity to be intimate with someone else, no strings attached. She continued, her voice shaky, yet determined. "There's this guy at work, someone I've always been somewhat attracted to. He's leaving the company soon, and I know I'll never see him again. This feels like the right time, a chance for me to explore this, without any repercussions for us in the long run." I sat there, stunned, unable to find the words as she looked at me with pleading eyes. She added, "Of course you have every right to say no." But then her expression hardened, and she said, "But if you do, I'll be mad, maybe even disappointed for who knows how long. It would just show your male toxicity and insecurity, don't you think?" I felt a knot forming in my stomach, the weight of her words pressing down on me, forcing me to confront not just the boundaries of our relationship, but the deep-seated fears and insecurities she was laying bare in this moment. It was a conversation laden with desperation and unspoken desires, a pivotal point that threatened to redefine everything we had built together. I don't consider myself to be toxic, and if not wanting your wife of 20-plus years to be with someone else is insecure, then I guess I am insecure. I told her that I appreciated her talking to me about this, but approval via coercion is not approval. I also said that I do not appreciate her language in describing my, as of yet, unknown reaction to this very significant issue that could affect the rest of our marriage/life. In the morning, she approached me with a somber expression, apologizing for the immense burden she had placed on my shoulders with her request. In an attempt to alleviate the pressure, she took it upon herself to make the decision. She informed me that she had booked a hotel room near where her co-workers were hosting a farewell party for the guy, intending to spend the night with him. She expressed a hopeful, yet tentative desire for me to be there when she returned, ready to answer any questions I might have about the encounter, but only afterward. She remained steadfast in her refusal to divulge any details about him before the event, arguing that ignorance would spare me unnecessary anguish, as she feared I would obsess over every detail. Yet, she contradicted herself by offering openness and transparency after the fact, a promise that felt hollow and insincere, as if she was banking on my reluctance to probe into the painful details. I found myself torn, grappling with a whirlpool of conflicting emotions. Part of me empathized with her, acknowledging the profound impact her cancer diagnosis must have had on her psyche, urging me to grant her this one request. Yet another part of me rebelled, a voice rising from within, urging me to stand firm, to reject this breach of trust and fidelity, even if it meant facing the potential fallout. Her best friend labeled me callous, accusing me of failing to fully grasp the depth of her trauma, urging me to allow her this escape. Yet I couldn't shake off the disbelief, the shock that she was willing to jeopardize over 2 decades of shared history, of love and companionship, for a fleeting connection with a virtual stranger. I felt lost in a sea of confusion, unable to find a clear path forward. I could feel empathy for her situation, a recognition of the fear and uncertainty that cancer brought into her life. Yet, this empathy battled fiercely with the anger bubbling within me, a righteous indignation at the violation of the sacred bonds of marriage. As I stood at this crossroads, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being trapped in a lose-lose situation, faced with a choice between swallowing my pride and potentially saving our marriage, or standing my ground and risking everything we had built together. The anger and empathy waged a war within me, leaving me paralyzed, unable to discern the right course of action in the face of such a complex, heart-wrenching dilemma. Part of me wants to know who this guy is. What does he look like? What has he got that is so enthralling for her? Is he just a safe option? Is he married? Does his wife know? Would I be a callous jerk for saying no? What can I do besides walking away? I was hoping that my opposition to her plans would give her pause, but unfortunately, that did not happen. I said, "I am a hard no, and I am not sure how I will feel about you if you go ahead with it." I was met once again with, "This is for me, it will be one time. What can I say to help you deal with it? You'll get over it. We were meant to be regardless of the situation," remarks. That day, the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken words and the echo of what she was planning to do. She was heading out to meet coworkers, or so she said, but the real plan was to meet that guy. Before she left, I asked her to shoot me a text when she was leaving for the bar, a small gesture, but one loaded with significance. When my phone buzzed with her message, a knot formed in my stomach. I couldn't help myself. I had to ask her one more time if she was really going to do this. Her reply came quick, cold, and distant. "I am not answering any more questions tonight. I will see you tomorrow." It felt like a punch in the gut. In a mix of anger and hurt, I blocked her number, a move that felt both impulsive and somehow right at that moment. Then, maybe out of desperation or some kind of crazy impulse, I found myself heading to the bar where she said the gathering would be. But I didn't go in. Nah, I just sat on a transit bench across the street, a silent observer in the unfolding drama. Sitting there, the cold bench pressing against me, I couldn't shake off this nagging need to see the guy, to understand what was going on. It was like this itch I couldn't scratch, wanting to know what he had that I didn't, trying to figure out why she was risking our marriage for him. The wait was a roller coaster of emotions, a part of me feeling kind of silly like I was some character in a cheesy movie. But another part of me, a louder part, felt like I had to do this, to seek some kind of understanding in the mess that was unfolding in my life. It was driving me nuts, not knowing who he was, what he looked like, or why she was so drawn to him. As I sat there, a weird mix of dread and anticipation was building up inside me, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest, a constant reminder of the raw, painful reality I was about to face. It was a strange moment, caught between love and fear, anger and desperation, all while waiting under the dim glow of the streetlight, hoping to find some answers in the night's uncertainty. After what seemed like an eternity, a woman that I recognized from my wife's office left the bar and got in a cab. Soon, other people started filing out, and a whole group came out, hugging a man and shaking his hand. I assumed that I had found the person my wife was meeting. I didn't see my wife, and briefly thought that maybe she had called it off. I unblocked her, but there were no messages. Everyone said their goodbyes and left. The man stood outside for a few minutes, and then my wife came out. She looked around, took his hand, and they started walking away together. Among all the emotions I experienced, trepidation, sadness, anger, it was disgust that truly encapsulated the event for me. This man was short, fat, and bald. All the things I can't compete with. Ultimately, I felt like a pervert for watching from a distance. I followed them until they reached the hotel, then turned around and went home. I woke up the next morning and put a lock on the master bedroom door. I moved my wife's things to the spare room and left a note asking her to find other accommodations as quickly as possible. I visited another friend who is a lawyer, and he gave me some sage advice and a couple of recommendations for divorce attorneys, making the introductions. My wife had been calling me numerous times since around 11 o'clock or so. Once I blocked her, the calls went to voicemail. I listened to the first couple, but I felt nothing but some satisfaction when she couldn't get through to me, and it was obvious that she was becoming concerned. I didn't want to go home that night, but my hasty exit earlier hadn't allowed me to properly plan for an overnight stay elsewhere. I arrived home around 9 o'clock, my mind swirling with the advice my buddy had given me, to record the interaction that was bound to happen. As I was halfway up the stairs, she emerged from the family room, her face a canvas of concern and confusion. "What's going on? Can we talk?" she asked, her voice tinged with desperation. But in my mind, we had already talked, already laid bare the raw and painful truths that hovered between us. I felt a tightness in my chest, a resistance to revisiting the anguish that had been stirred up. "I am not interested in discussing this tonight," I replied tersely, my voice carrying a finality that echoed with the sound of my retreating footsteps. I shut the bedroom door behind me, a barrier between us that felt both necessary and childishly stubborn. She lingered outside the door for a moment, a silent plea for dialogue, but eventually retreated when it became clear that I wasn't going to respond. I lay in bed, a turmoil of emotions swirling within me, feeling somewhat childish for shutting her out, yet unable to bear the sight of her in that moment. By Monday morning, the house bore a heavy silence, a testament to the chasm that had widened between us. As I got ready for work, she approached me, her eyes holding a hint of hope as she asked, "Can we discuss getting back to normal?" I paused, feeling a surge of bitterness and resentment. "You've been doing all the talking for both of us for the last week, so why don't you continue?" I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Without waiting for a response, I grabbed my things and headed for the door, the finality of my actions settling in with each step. As I drove to work, I couldn't shake off the heavy feeling in my chest, a mixture of anger, hurt, and perhaps a tinge of regret. I knew deep down that communication was key, yet the wound felt too fresh, too raw to expose to the air just yet. In the midst of the turmoil, a part of me clung to the practical steps I needed to take, a path laid out by the advice of a friend. I had an appointment lined up with the attorneys he recommended, a necessary step in navigating the rocky terrain that lay ahead. It was a step towards protecting myself, yet with each move forward, I couldn't shake off the nagging feeling of loss, the crumbling of a partnership that had once held so much promise. I am actually more disgusted by who she chose than the sex itself, if that makes any sense. I asked her to find somewhere else to live. My lawyer wasn't available for a few days, so I was faced with the reality of having to live with my wife in the interim. I really didn't want to go home and have any discussion, let alone a discussion about our relationship. When I got home that day, I walked into what felt like an ambush. Her friends and my mother-in-law were there, seemingly ready for battle. Instead of finding a remorseful wife, I was met with a full-court press, a barrage of accusations and judgments hurled at me from every direction. The best friend forever seemed to be orchestrating the whole thing, leading the charge with a fervor that was almost frightening. They threw every conceivable argument at me, trying to paint her actions in a more sympathetic light. "She's been through a lot," they said, their voices rising in unison. "You don't know what it's like to face something like this," they continued, their faces flushed with emotion. They insisted it was a one-time thing, that she had been brave enough to tell me instead of hiding it, that she would never see the guy again. And then, the accusation that stung the most: "You are a jerk for what you have been putting her through these last couple of days." I stood there, a smirk plastered on my face, a defense mechanism to shield myself from the onslaught of words. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a mixture of anger and humiliation bubbling within me as I endured their verbal assault. Finally, when there was a lull in their tirade, I seized the opportunity to speak. "Are you all done now?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I turned to my wife, my eyes searching hers as I asked, "Is there anyone else you forgot to tell about this? Anyone else you want to bring in to berate me?" The room fell silent, the atmosphere thick with tension as I continued, my voice steady, yet tinged with bitterness. "I plan to sit down with each of your husbands and tell them exactly how you've treated me today. How you shamed me, verbally abused me, and tried to force me into staying in a marriage with someone who betrayed me." I could see the color drain from their faces, the sudden realization of the gravity of their actions hitting them. "I had no say in what happened, and you have no say in whether I stay or not," I declared, my voice rising with each word, echoing with the sound of my own heart pounding in my ears. With a firm and resolute voice, I told them to leave, to step out of a situation that was between me and my wife, and no one else. The room was heavy with a silence that bore the weight of unspoken regrets and the shattered pieces of a relationship that had once been whole. It was a silence that spoke of the end, of boundaries crossed, and of the irrevocable damage that had been done. My soon-to-be ex-wife kind of apologized. She expressed regret over everything that happened. I pointed out that there's a difference between regret and remorse. Regret is feeling sorry because of the consequences, realizing that life in our relationship will never be the same due to her indifference to my feelings and desires. She sat down, her face a canvas of mixed emotions, and offered to answer any questions I had, no matter how uncomfortable. I could feel a whirlpool of anger, betrayal, and sadness swirling inside me as I asked the question that had been haunting me: why? I wasn't curious about why she chose that specific individual, whom I couldn't see any appeal in, but why she felt the need to seek affection outside our marriage in the first place. She began to explain, her voice breaking at times, that her cancer diagnosis had shaken her to her core, instilling a fear of death that seemed to be constantly looming over her. She viewed the affair as a way to step out of that dark tunnel, a chance to live for herself, detached from her responsibilities as a wife and a mother. She described the guy as someone who had harbored feelings for her for a long time, someone who was completely different from me, and whom she knew would not reject her. I felt a surge of bitterness as I listened, unable to hold back my own feelings of hurt and betrayal. "If I were to risk our marriage, it would be for someone significantly better than you," I retorted, the words coming out harsher than I intended. I recounted the night I saw them together, walking hand in hand towards a hotel, a sight that had seared itself into my memory, leaving a scar that felt fresh and raw. I questioned her, trying to gauge if their relationship had started earlier than she had admitted, but she denied it. Her denial left me in a state of uncertainty, torn between wanting to believe her and the nagging doubt that clawed at my trust. I couldn't contain my astonishment at the blatant disrespect she had shown me, especially after the many years we had spent building our life together. I told her that I couldn't overlook such a betrayal, that I couldn't stay with someone who had so little regard for our relationship. I expressed my hope that we could separate amicably, revealing that I had already scheduled a meeting with a lawyer to discuss our options. Despite my clear stance on the matter, she remained defiant, insisting that she wasn't going anywhere, and that divorce was not an option. She held a belief, one that seemed delusional to me at that moment, that we could work through this, even suggesting marriage counseling. I declined firmly, unable to see the point in seeking therapy when I wasn't the one who had strayed. As I stood there, faced with her desperate pleas, I felt a deep sadness engulfing me, a mourning for the loss of the trust and love that had once been the foundation of our marriage. It was a painful realization that we had reached a point of no return, a crossroads where our paths diverged, leading us into an uncertain and heartbreaking future. After serving her divorce papers and a notice to vacate, my soon-to-be ex-wife moved in with her mom, She has been persistently suggesting options like having an open relationship or engaging in threesomes, but I have firmly rejected her advances and insisted that she call before visiting. It seems she is finally understanding that we won't be reconciling. She initially threatened to prolong the divorce process, but so far, she has been cooperative. The most difficult part was explaining the reason for the divorce to our daughter and witnessing her plea for her mom's sake. It's doubtful that I would have received the same level of understanding if I had been the one who cheated. Harsh words were exchanged, but she has now been served and moved out. I am hopeful for a reasonable mediation during the upcoming divorce proceedings. We are proceeding with the divorce, but due to our location, we must be legally separated for a year. My soon-to-be ex-wife is offering concessions in the divorce if I agree to marriage counseling, but I am not considering it at the moment. We are still in the process of defining the terms of our separation and divorce. The house is legally mine, as it was a premarital asset, protecting it from any claims. Although she could potentially claim a share of my pension, vehicles, and vacation property, I could argue that she lived rent-free for over 20 years and has her own financial resources. I might agree to a retirement top-up since she was a stay-at-home mom while our daughter was young, but that's as far as I am willing to go. Regarding our daughter and her friend group, our daughter is not taking her mother's side despite their close relationship. She is currently limiting her interactions with her mom and accepting the reality of our separation. The friends who facilitated the affair have faced backlash from their own spouses, although this seems to be subsiding. I have no plans to date or marry again in the foreseeable future. It is clear that you are standing firm in your boundaries, valuing self-respect and personal well-being over the preservation of a marriage that has suffered a severe breach of trust. Navigating the tumultuous waters of betrayal and the breakdown of a long-term relationship is an incredibly painful process, laden with complex emotions and difficult decisions. Remember to prioritize your own healing and seek support from loved ones or professionals who can provide guidance and understanding during this challenging time.